Alright, episode 20, and finally entering the letter B in our list of animals. And today we are going to be talking about the Bactrian Camel. Now, the Bactrian Camel is both famous and kind of left out at the same time. Famous in the sense of when you think of that two-humped camel, well, that's the Bactrian. However, when it comes to cultural influence, you almost always see the dromedary camel due to its connection with the Middle East and Africa. However, there's been a lot of influence the Bactrian camel has on society that you may not be aware of. Now, before I get too far into it, I do want to discuss what I'm doing with the exhibit this time. And I felt it would be quite interesting to thematically have sort of a double hill, sort of representing the actual humps of the camel, and then making the exhibit in oval shape and really just making it something similar to their natural environment. Now, what is their natural environment? Well, I'm glad you asked. So, as you can see with the Zoopedia, they are from the area of Central Asia. Now, it is important to note that that is the domesticated range that they show, consisting of areas from Mongolia to southern Ukraine, Anatolia, the Caucasus, pretty much all the Stan nations, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. Now, they are also in parts of China, most notably the province of Xinjiang. I have no idea if I said that correctly, because Mandarin only has about 5 sounds and 28,000 words. So, hopefully I said it correctly. Now, the wild populations are very, very sparse. There's only about 3 major regions, consisting of one small location in Mongolia, one in the province that I said earlier, Xinjiang, and the other province of Gansu. And they are actually the largest mammal in their native range. The Bactrian camel is also technically the largest camelid, and that is by weight, seeing how they are shorter than the more prevalent dromedary camel, but they do weigh more and are, generally speaking, larger than the dromedary. Now, their appearance is certainly going to be quite a bit different from the dromedary, because while they do technically live in a desert, and parts of it are hot, like the Gobi Desert, the part that consists of China and Mongolia, a lot of the area they live in is known as steppe lands, which are somewhere in between a desert and a tundra. They are usually pretty cold, however, the temperatures definitely change, and they are well adapted to surviving in such an area, but they are much colder, and the extreme weather that they do exist in the steppe areas is actually a very massive temperature range, from as high as 122 degrees Fahrenheit to negative 20 degrees. And you can tell that the shaggy coat the Bactrian camel usually sports in the winter is one of its many adaptations to deal with that. Just like the dromedary camel, they also have the ability to close their nostrils to stop sand from getting in. They also have a double set of eyelashes that function the same way for their eyes. Now, I'm sure everyone knows the idea that they can store water in their hump, and I'm sure almost as many of you will realize that they don't actually store water like a bucket, and more along the lines that they absorb water and fats into their hump, which when they need it, sort of get squeezed out and used almost like a sponge more than a bucket. Now, it is also important to note that camels are the only animal species with the capability of drinking salt water without any negative effects. While I have a lot of information, I would like to note that I'm almost done with the exhibit. Unfortunately, it was a pretty simple build this time. Simply, like I said, making those 2 sections to be somewhat more like the camel's humps, and then adding general foliage to give it a better look. So I hope you enjoy B-roll, because we actually have a very interesting story this time near the end. But we will get to that in time. So, the Bactrian Camel was actually very, very important for the steppe peoples of, as I said, modern-day Kazakhstan, Mongolia, etc., because they were an amazing pack animal and were the most common one used in the famous Silk Road from China to the Roman Empire. And they were pretty much known to be able to carry anywhere from 370 to 550 pounds over almost 30 miles in a day. Now, as we breeze on through the exhibit, I'm going to talk a little about the history of the animal, and that can go back long, long ago in the North American continent where all camels first came from. That's something a lot of people don't realize, that camels originally evolved in North America along the Great Plains, alongside horses, which were also native to North America. And then during the freezing of the Barren Sea between Alaska and Russia, they crossed over, and eventually, about 1 million years ago, the Bactrian camel diverged from the greater camelid species to become the one that we know today. Now, while they are abundant in their domestic range, the wild genus is actually critically endangered and is definitely slowly reaching the 0 mark. Now, when was this camel domesticated is kind of up for debate, but generally speaking, it is assumed that it was domesticated in 4,500 BC. Now, I'm not sure how quickly I'm going to be able to get through this last little story, but it is something that I absolutely could not leave out after I learned about it. And this is probably going to take up the last of the video, so buckle in. Once upon a time in the year 1836, a U.S. officer by the name of Major George H. Crossman thought to himself, after his time in the Seminole Wars, that camels would be a far more useful pack animal than horses. Now, this man's intelligence should be very obvious when I tell you that the Seminole Wars took place in the swamps of Florida. Why he thought camels would be better than horses, I don't know. But that logic did not dissuade his friend, Major Henry C. Wayne, from doing more research and eventually recommending importing camels for quite some time until, at the time, future President of the Confederate States of America, that traitor Jefferson Davis, was appointed as Secretary of War by President Franklin Pierce. Since he was a friend of Wayne's, he decided to continuously ask the U.S. government several times to go through with the plan. Once, he was even quoted in a letter as to say, "I once again invite attention to the advantages to be anticipated from the use of camels and dromedaries for military and other purposes." Two things about this that I find interesting. First off, the fact that he opens it up with "I again" means that this is not the first letter he sent to the goddamn president in regards to bringing camels to the United States. Secondly, they also seem to separate camels with dromedaries, meaning that, at least in nomenclature back then, the dromedary camel was not seen as the same as the Bactrian camel. But, alas, despite how insane it was, on March 3rd, 1855, Congress had actually allocated $30,000 to acquire and transport 70 camels to Indianola, Texas, which were then sent to Camp Verde, Texas, over the course of 2 years. Now, you may be wondering, what happened to the American Camel Corps? Well, quite simply, when the onslaught of the Civil War started up, not only did Jefferson Davis, the passion project manager of this whole thing, abandon the United States, its people, its military, and the oath that he gave, he also abandoned all 70 of those camels, because this man is not only an idiot, he's heartless. But there was an attempt before that started to have them carry letters and other forms of mail over the Mojave Desert from Texas to California, and wasn't that successful. So essentially, once Jefferson Davis left, they didn't see any headway with it. The United States military decided to just auction them off to the civilian market, and from there on, it was completely dead in the water. And while there were those previous reasons I gave for why it didn't work, there was also the idea that the Union was a, and I quote, horse and mule organization. Pretty much meaning that they had no use for something like a camel when they have plenty of horses, plenty of mules, and let's be real, that would have been ridiculous and very niche. Not only the fact of camels really aren't good with mountains, marshlands, or anything that isn't flat open terrain, but seeing how after the Civil War the first automobile would be made about 20 to 30 years later, it was shortcoming for the horse, let alone the camel. Not to mention, horses can still be ridden by people in a cavalry sense. Camels, they're not nearly as coordinated. But there were times for the dromedary, but that is going to be saved for that episode. So wasn't that a nice little story? Nothing like the lunatic president of the Confederacy bringing camels to the United States for no other reason than his buddy heard from a buddy who heard from a buddy before that, hey, camels are pretty neat. Well, with that all being said, hope you enjoyed the video, hope you enjoyed the story. As you can see, the video has long since passed the actual exhibit, and I didn't really talk about much because there wasn't much to talk about, let's be real. Either way, go on outside, touch grass, get some fresh air, enjoy life, and have a good day. Goodbye.